Hey, my name is Jan. I'm the iOS department lead at STRV, which is right across the street from here. And I'll be telling you more about tech debt through the eyes of the developers, if it's not clear, because it isn't. But the designers would kill me if I used more than 2 lines, because it's not allowed in this template. So here we are. Wow! This is completely dangerous. All right. Does the clicker click? Click? Ha, it does. So how does this talk work? Thank you for helping me. I'm an engineer, I'm a programmer, I'm a developer, but I'm also a manager. And you've heard a lot from managers today. And so I decided to take this talk from another point of view. And that's from the point of view of the actual engineers who work on projects. So I went and asked about 20 people 3 simple questions. First was, what is tech debt? The second was, how did it affect you in your career? And the third was, well, how would you solve it? And those are the answers. I will be reading from the slides. That's not typically allowed. Previous presentation, right? Tech debt is code which is potential cause of trouble. All the developers understand. We try to avoid it. We know it can cause trouble. Tech debt is the result of postponing a resolution of a problem in a favor of knowingly limited solution. When we create tech debt, we know. We're usually pushed to do it. We don't like to do it though. Tech debt for me appears every time when somebody decides to cut corners in a technical solution. Might be me. It might be for many reasons. For example, rushed project because of tight deadlines, no research in the problem area, or simple lack of previous experience. So sometimes it may happen that we haven't done our research, or it hasn't been done. And well, here we are with the tech debt because we assumed something, but now that's not true. And we only find out later down the line. Tech debt stems from bad architectural decisions caused by either the lack of understanding of the system. See, the understanding of the system is very important as whole, or simply by cutting corners to save time, or even our own laziness. All the developers even mentioned the laziness, by the way. These are just quotes that I got from a lot of text in the answers. So we know we can cause tech debt just because of our laziness, but we typically don't, definitely not at STRV. It's the nature of any software development, and it is. It always happens, and it will always happen, no matter how much you try to avoid it. You may say that the greenfield projects are having it easy because they have no tech debt. Oh, that's bullshit. They have tech debt on the second day of development. They do. I don't think that tech debt is code that isn't written according to the latest trends. And that's interesting to me, because we developers, we really want to try the new stuff, the shiny stuff, right? The one that was just released. In JS, that means every JavaScript, it means every 2 weeks where a new framework is introduced. In iOS world, where I'm coming from, that would be every WWDC, Worldwide Developer Conference. But we understand that that's not a tech debt. It may be a good reasoning to just stick with what we have. It typically is. It can be unreadable code or unclear code, perhaps just a result of poor knowledge transfer. So if you come to a code base and you have not written it, and you don't understand it, well, something went wrong, and that's tech debt on its own. The code not being clear and not being documented, well, you've just created a huge problem down the line. And it's anything that slows down the further development in some way. I love this one. It's things we say we'll do in the future, but we never do, for various reasons. but we try to do them. And as developers, we'd love to do them. It's you making a deal with yourself why a proper solution should not be implemented. And there's always a discussion inside of us, developers, where we know that we're cutting a corner and we don't want to, but we need to play the devil's advocate. And sometimes it's actually a good thing. It's a decision in favor of older technology due to familiarity, deadlines, significant code changes required, etc. May or may not be true, depends on the project. It's a fear of changes, and this is typically true, that improvements might break the existing functionality. You know, don't touch it if it's not broken, but you're not repaying the tech debt as you should. If you let the tech debt spiral out of control, eventually, well, it's going to be way worse. It's a decision to create a simple solution that is quick to do, but not robust or extendable. Robust and extendable was mentioned by almost every single person. Not over-engineered, but robust and extendable, so that we know that we're not shooting ourselves in our foot right off the bat. It's a solution we know is only temporary, and we will need to return to it later. As I mentioned before, we may never do. And it's using tech stack, which is insecure and or is not maintained anymore. Who remembers log4j? It's your nightmare. Indeed it is. But we didn't even know that was tech debt before it failed, right? So the takeaways from this. It's inevitable. It will always happen. Prioritizing development speed over output quality makes tech debt. Postponing issues for the future us to solve creates tech debt. And we may never get to it. Lack of maintenance creates tech debt. Not doing our best job possible, oh, well, that creates mess, but also mess is tech debt eventually. Bad architectural decisions, oh yeah, please don't, right? Because that's gonna kill you later on. Unless you hand the project over to someone else, but we wouldn't do that, right? Fear of changes, if it works, don't touch it, that's very typical. Lack of robustness and extendability, oh yeah, but we try not to. Temporary solutions, quote unquote, those are obvious, and tech debt dependencies, well, please choose those wisely. Second question, how have you been affected? The people told me many stories, some fun, some not very much fun. The first one was, I took over a legacy project that was used that used a straightforward solution in the code, but it was copied all over the place. Oh my, that was a problem down the line 3 years later. Working on a legacy code base with lots of tech debt without any refactor along the way was very stressful to the developer. We hate tech debt because it makes us hate the job. It makes us hate the project. So it's better not to create it or fix it later on. It was to the point where rewriting it from scratch, the application would probably be a faster solution. Sometimes happens. And when that happens, oh, you messed up. If down the line you need to rewrite the project, oh, God, someone gets fired. The code base I worked on was very fragile, and any additional code or fixes would have to be written in a similar manner, as it would take a lot of time to decouple it. So it was just bulking up. If you don't repay the tech debt, you just continue in the old ways, in the bad ways, and it keeps bulking up, and then you're in trouble. In Android and iOS development, which is dear to me, tech debt is a never-ending story. It always happens on long-term projects mostly, because the platforms go so quickly forward and the tech becomes obsolete rather fast. Obsolete may be a harsh word, but anyways, every year it happens that new technologies are introduced, old ones are deprecated. You need to keep in the race, right? You need to keep improving the code base continuously so that you adapt. A year, 2, not a big deal. 5 years, oh my. Objective-C, now we have Swift, right, in iOS. Objective-C, it's hard to find developers. It may actually, your tech debt may actually get so bad that you will not be able to hire developers. I'm not gonna lie, sometimes a shortcut is simpler and much faster to develop. Oh yeah, of course. We understand it as developers. I mostly experience tech debt due to time pressure on projects. This is repeating in all the answers. Time pressure is hell. Even though we knew that the given task needed way more time to provide the best possible solution, we had to choose the faster way. It happens. I experienced tech debt especially on long-running projects, and that is self-explanatory, right? It happened to me mostly on quickly growing projects, or projects with bad initial specification. Oh my, if you don't control the rapid growth, especially in a startup, you're in trouble. And if you spec everything out initially in a wrong way, oh my, that's refactoring not only in the code, but in literally everywhere. I wasn't able to write new functionality in a way that would apply the best practices because the older code that was crucial to the whole project just didn't allow me to. And that happens. Then you just keep bulking up again. I was often challenged by the growing complexity of technical debt, building on top of each other, leading to poor architecture and scalability. I love this growing complexity of technical debt. If you have a tech debt that you don't maintain, it grows. And with each piece of tech debt that you pile on the old one, it becomes more complex, and it layers, becomes a time bomb. It's always hard to define the line on when the costs saved by introducing technical debts are higher than the cost of maintaining an unsustainable code base. And here I really like this because the engineer understands that sometimes introducing a little piece of tech debt is actually the right thing to do. You know, not over-engineer at this point, not foolproof it at this point, document it, know about it, but go for the quick solution. It's not bad, but you need to keep track of it. I either had to pay off the debt and refactor, which usually leads to delays in development process, or I had to leave it there and needed to compromise on new features so they would be somehow compatible with the current unfit solution. You either pay it back, or you just live with it forever, and it gets worse and worse. This answer I loved. Have you ever been affected? Always. From time to time, we had to implement some feature real fast due to the deadline, and then we had to refactor it 1 month later. And this is actually pretty reasonable. So if you documented it, you know about it, and 1 month later, you got back to it and refactored, oh my, you may have just saved the customer or the project because something needed to be released quite quickly, but you returned to it, which is not bad. I was impacted by a sort of poorly written code. It was too complicated, and especially there was no documentation of one of the main features of the app I took over. Tech debt, yeah, complicated tech debt, problem. No documentation for the complicated tech debt. Oh my, please don't. The worst technical debt is the one that you cannot control. I love this one. The debt I faced was on the back end that I had to consume. And so the developer couldn't even do anything about it. It was just there sitting on the back end, and he was just crying in pain because he had to consume that API that wasn't fixing itself. So the takeaways. Tech debt is very stressful for the engineers. Can be caused by code duplicated all over the place. Fragile code bases are really, really hard to refactor, and the bad practices just keep bulking up. The tech can become quickly obsolete on some platforms, especially mobile or front-end development. If you have those engineers, please listen to them. They need to be supported by you. Sometimes a shortcut is simple and much faster to develop. And yes, we don't mind a little tech debt if it's controlled. And as one person said, sometimes a little tech debt doesn't hurt. Time pressure is always, well, not always, but often the culprit. And indeed it is. Deadlines are the bane. Long-running projects suffer the most, obviously, because it keeps piling up, technology changes, etc., etc. Tech debt complexity tends to grow, but also overcomplicated code is tech debt too. So you need to have the perfect balance of the right solution that is not tech debt, but also it's not over-engineered. And documentation is very important. If you don't document, the person that will take the project over from you will hate you down your bones. So please document at least comments in the code or a document. That would be nice. Anyways, the last question was how to solve tech debt. I asked the engineers. Always thinking about how the code can be decoupled later on and easily replaced by a cleaner solution is the way to go. So you need to keep thinking forward. You need to keep thinking ahead. What if in the future this needs to be updated or changed? How can I prepare the code so that it's good to go in that way? By documenting tech debt, for example, in the backlog, as you mentioned in your previous talk, we can address it in the future when there is time for refactoring. So if you ever try to tell me that the engineers don't work with tech debt and don't help the PMs, don't, because they do. They know what needs to be happening. Please talk to your engineers. Find time to regularly update the project with up-to-date tech and do proper code reviews. Up-to-date tech especially important if you have a lot of dependencies, like the log4j that I just mentioned. Get time, refactor, upgrade. It was from one guy that is very direct in his answers, but I love it. You need to get time so that you can refactor and update the libraries. And if you don't, you have a problem. Some tech debt may be prevented by code reviews, and of course, automated testing. You mentioned testing as well in your talk. Excellent, because if you have tech debt, but it's covered in tests, it's much easier to refactor it, right? And it becomes way easier to work with in the future. And code reviews, obviously. If you don't do code reviews, please do them. By applying continuous improvements of existing code. Oh yeah, continuous improvement, that's the key. Whenever we touch some tech debt-ridden code, we should improve or refactor it as part of the development process. As I said, there will always be tech debt. It begins on the day one of the development. You need to make sure that fixing it and working with it is part of your process. Encourage the refactoring mindset. Ideally, one should always feel comfortable to refactor prior to implementing new features when faced with the limitation posed by the previous technical debt. I love this part, as this is probably the point in time where the technical debt is no longer bringing benefit. We know that the shortcut that we've made brings benefit in many cases, but at some point, the problems outweigh the benefits, and that point is the good time to fix it. Don't over-engineer, as it can easily become tech debt too. And we, as engineers, we really like to over-engineer, so we need to keep ourselves on leash at least a bit so that it doesn't happen, but at least at STRV it doesn't happen. Consciously introducing isolated technical debt can be a good strategy, and it can, to postpone the resolution of a problem to a point in the future when we know we'll have more context about it. So you're at some point in the development, you don't have all the information, especially at the beginning. It's okay to know that you're introducing a little bit of a tech debt. Perhaps the feature is not fully ironed out, but needs to be tested. Well, you don't make it perfect. You make it good enough, but you know about it and you fix it later. If you have to make some compromise, put some comments and documentation in place. Please do. The developers will love you. So you're aware of it in the future, and you can try to get rid of it as soon as the opportunity presents itself. When you find yourself working in the code base with a lot of technical debt, try to define clear goals for improvement. So as you said, again, in your previous, it was a lovely talk before. You said that you don't just allocate like a random amount of time, right, to fixing tech debt. That's stupid. You define clear goals, you define what you need to improve, how much time it will take, and you work on them, ideally consistently throughout the development process, along with the development of new things. That was really, really nice remark, by the way. I believe tech debt is inevitable. The only thing we can do is to minimize it as much as possible. It's a reality. It comes with the job. It's always great to bet on solutions with strong team or community behind. So for example, log4j, it's not a bad dependency. It was fixed, right? It was fixed. We just upgraded. But if it was not maintained, oh my, you'd be in trouble. Sorry?
All the Minecraft clients would be hacked.
All the Minecraft clients would be dead or hacked. If full project rewrite is not an option, just start refactoring it bit by bit, even if there is no light at the end of the tunnel. And as engineers, we do feel like that. We take over a project, it's a shitty code base, and there seems to be no light at the tunnel. It's just darkness everywhere. But you need to keep going bit by bit, and it will get better. By doing PR reviews and calling out hacks, encouraging refactors, and being conservative in using new third-party packages, you can also help to solve tech debt. Do not leave things behind, and if you do, include such tasks in the upcoming sprints. Talk to and make agreements with your PMs and clients. You need to talk to your PMs. If you don't talk to your PMs, they will never give you the time, and they will never hear an explanation for why you need to refactor, and it will never happen. But if you do, the PMs are very reasonable people, right, Vojta? Yes. It's important to distinguish between the tech debt that has to be improved because of increasing complexity or improper solution. That's the one that we really need to fix. And the tech debt that developers want to improve because they like the new tech. Based on this, a different priority should be assigned to tech debt. And again, tech debt has levels of severity, and we need to fix the severe ones first. Tackling a tech debt should be properly planned by booking capacity either in small regular intervals like one story per sprint, for example, or having a dedicated sprint focused on improvements and innovations, for example, once per quarter. That's the solution that you mentioned, like stop everything and let's just refactor, or just allocating 20% of the sprint you mentioned, something like that, right? So the takeaways here. Think about how the code can be decoupled later on. Document your tech debt. Stay up to date with the tech and the best practices. Do proper code reviews, and automated testing really helps. Find time to refactor. Find time to upgrade, encourage the refactoring mindset. It needs to be in every engineering department. It needs to exist and be supported by the management. Make continuous improvements a part of the process, right? It needs to be a thing that is not extra, like, oh, so here we're going to refactor. No. It has to happen continuously and always. Assign priority to each piece of the tech debt because they have different severities. Do not over-engineer, please. Don't be afraid of tech debt. Control it, because we all know it's there. It will always be there. We can't do anything about it, so let's control it. Choose your dependencies wisely. Talk to and make arrangements with your PMs and clients. And last but not least, always leave the campground cleaner than you found it. This is one of my favorite things, or favorite mentions or articles about tech debt. There's one smart person that I forgot the name of that said, you know, be a good Boy Scout. When you touch the campground, you don't leave it in a bigger mess than before. You leave it at least as good as before. And with code, we can do the same thing. Whenever you touch a code base, make it a little bit better than it was before. And over time, you will refactor the code base to a perfect shape. And thank you.